Yeah, so on that note, I think we're going to maintain a very realist tone. So please let us know, question the sources that we are using also in the process of justifying our claims. Don't take any information prima facie, please question it. Even the news that you guys read on the way here, perhaps. Understand that every news agency has a position. Only goddamn pissed that I use the word position because he thinks there's a bias. But I feel like when a bias is solidified and it becomes unshakable to an extent that even your morality is not stepping in the way, it's a position. But only you can counter whatever you feel like.
We'll start off with that word position, right? So before we start off, we just clarify the position that this session is holding, right? So we have taken a lot of our understanding from the game theory perspective provided by Professor Jiang. I disagree with it heavily, right? So it's going to be a big back and forth between a very neutral realist perspective and then my perspective contradicting it, looking at the class effect of war, and then Sid will be interjecting with me. So let us start with the session on that note. Sid said that our positions.
Ground rules, procedures.
Yeah, oh yeah, ground rules. Okay, if you guys have anything to interject, kindly just raise your hands. We will stop. As soon as we're completing the idea, we will stop. We will let you guys come in. That's basically the major procedure, and we'll keep opening the floor for discussion. When we do, feel free to like just go across. Right. Let us try not to talk over each other. And that way we'll have a very productive session.
And if you guys have a thought, Navin, this goes to you because they
know.
Yeah. But if you have a thought, don't wait till we open the floor. Just freely raise your hand. If either of us are speaking, we'll finish speaking, and then we'll open the floor to you. Others are free to counter you, and you are free to justify and defend your claim. The main outline is that Uni is going to set the tone. He's going to just do a quick recap on Shia-Sunni conflicts, the three revolutions, set the tone for what's basically happening in the Middle East, after which we look at the law of escalation, after which we will look at Indian position in the area, and we'll talk about best case, worst case scenarios, and then maybe we'll open the floor to discussion for reflection. So that's going to be the main area. So if you have a thought that you think that would be covered in the future, maybe hold on to it. But yeah, that's the main premise of today.
All good.
All right.
So we'll start with positions. So our idea is that we need to keep in mind that there are a lot of biases, right? So we'll call them positions. That's a disagreement we will be having. But essentially, yeah, I'll explain that. So the disagreement is essentially that various news agencies, various information networks have their own biases when approaching this particular conflict. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all of those biases and then present them as a position, essentially saying that everyone is talking from a perspective of national interest, right? So Western media will look at Western interests, Middle Eastern media will look at Middle Eastern interests, and then the Russian and Chinese powers will look at their own interests. So when we're getting all of this information, it's important that we look at it from multiple sectors, even if it's things like personal anecdotes from family that's abroad, right? Some of us might have relatives who are living in the Middle East. They will be talking based off of their experience of life, right? So they might have gotten a lot from the Middle East, and they might feel that the attack on the Middle East is wrong, right? Or maybe they suffered a lot in the Middle East, and they might think it's completely justified. So we need to keep in mind that a lot of this comes from at the end of the day, individual interest, national interest, and that is something we need to keep in mind when we are looking at the information. And at the same time, we want to take into account what fuels each of our interests with regard to the war as well, right? So it essentially brings the idea of an international problem, an international conflict, to a personal setting. So at the end of the day, how are we affected? What are our perspectives based on how we are affected? So that's our approach for today. So that's just setting the tone. I'll start with a little bit of history, right? So whenever people look at the conflict in Iran, it always starts off from the Shia-Sunni conflict. Iran is the biggest Shia majority country in the world. They are essentially the Shia bloc of the Middle East, right? And then their direct opposition would be Saudi Arabia, right? But when we look at the Shia-Sunni conflict, it has never become a global conflict ever, except for in the case of Yemen, right? Wherein the territorial conflict with regard to Shia and Sunni has been very clear. Shia countries have had their own territory. They have not encroached on Sunni countries. The entire conflict is based off of something that is very theological. The Shia-Sunni conflict is, hey, you are a follower of the descendant of Abraham, which is his grandson, or you are a follower of his son-in-law, right? So that is essentially where the question lies: who has the divine authority? Abraham. Oh my bad. Muhammad. Yeah, Ali and Abu Bakr. Yeah. Redact Abraham. I meant Muhammad. Yeah. So Yeah, essentially that is where the entire conflict is based on. It's a theological discussion, and that is how the conflict has been throughout centuries, except for when it came down to the Yemeni conflict and the Syrian conflict, wherein the idea of whether that state should be a Shia majority or a Sunni majority came down to the population versus the elites. So in most of these countries, the elites are often Sunni majority people, and the average person is a Shia person, and that is very specifically with these two countries, because other countries there's a Sunni majority population. Okay, so that is the lens that the conflict is initially given. Now, my take is that that is not where the conflict starts, because at the end of the day, there is always a third party involved.
So you're saying right now the lens which the conflict is viewed is like the Syria and the Yemen situation.
Very similar.
You disagree?
I agree. Yeah, exactly. Okay. I disagree with that.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So this is not about Shia Sunni. This is about interventionism, US interventionism, yes. Right? So we will look at how to look into this through what the blocks essentially are. Right? So once we understand who's involved in the conflict, we'll be able to have a better look at it. So let us look at the Islamic blocks. You have the OAC, Organization of Arab Countries, which is known as the Arab world. Right? These countries are, combined by this idea of Arab superiority. So they're Arab majority countries where the ethnic population is what defines it. Then there's the OIC, which is the Organization of Islamic Countries, right? Which is again religiously contained. Now, what would be the outliers? OAC will not have countries like Pakistan, Afghanistan, Myanmar, etc. The OIC, however, has these countries. That's the difference, right? Now, aside from that, we have the OPEC, which is the oil and petroleum countries, right? This again has countries like Venezuela and stuff who have a lot of oil in their
and now Russia also.
Russia as well, yeah. So OPEC and OPEC plus countries are another block that we can look at, and the OECD is one more block that we look at, which is what is the OECD again? Economic Cooperation. Yeah. So it is at the end of the day, these are the different organizational levels that is there in the Middle East. Now, once we understand these criteria, we understand that the division is not based off of Shia and Sunni, right? It is based off of whether your religious groups are the same, whether your ethnic groups are the same, or your economic interests are the same, right? Or resource based, absolutely. Right? So when we look at the resource based economic interest, that is when US comes in, right? So US has a lot of vested interest in two groups, OPEC and GCC, right? So the GCC is essentially Gulf countries cooperation, which is basically an economic unit. They look at massive industrialization, urbanization, so on and so forth for the Middle Eastern countries. This includes countries like Saudi Arabia, Oman, UAE, and so on and so forth. And then the OPEC countries are oil production countries. They have very high amounts of oil output.
It's important to understand that the GCC also invests heavily into the US stock market. Is what created the petrodollar in 74 with the Nixon administration. That's basically what has been doing most of the heavy lifting for the dollar value today. A lot of that money is then invested into the stock market, and so in a way you can also make the correlation that the GCC is propping up the current AI bubble that's going on in the stock market in the States right now.
Right. So essentially GCC has a lot of vested interests in the economic growth that is coming from the US stock market, right? Which explains their alliance. Why does US have so many military bases in the GCC? Because there is economic incentive to it, right? And that is very important to keep in mind, because one of the key arguments of this entire discussion will be the profitability of war, right? We will get to that eventually. Let us start a little with what Iran looks like, right? Now Iran has had three major revolutions. We will consider this the fourth revolution. The first revolution was in 1901, 1905, yeah, which was when they wanted to set up a democracy for the first time. It failed because of Russian and British intervention, right? So this created a big amount of suspicion in the Iranian populace. They were like, Russia and the UK want us to stay an weak monarchy that can be exploited. Then over the centuries, essentially what happened was the want for a democratic governance was successful. Despite Russian and British intervention, they were able to create a democratic situation, which brought into power someone known as Mossadegh, right? So Mossadegh was the first and only democratic elected leader of Iran. Now, what did Mossadegh do as soon as he came into power? He nationalized oil.
Yeah.
Right? Now, which country hates when countries nationalize oil? USA. So until then, USA was not even in the picture. They didn't care, right? But when oil in Iran was nationalized, USA got involved and they toppled Mossadegh and they established the then Shah.
MI6 and CIA were both involved.
Both involved. So I think the CIA had this thing called, what is it, Operation Ajax, right? And MI6 had the Operation Boot. So they basically came in and they toppled the democratic government in Iran.
53.
Right? It was in 1953. And then 1979 had the most popular revolution, which reinstated the IRGC. So when Mossadegh was toppled, who was placed in? There was a coup, right? So the military coup, the person that was placed in is the Shah's family, right? So the Shah was reinstated into power. It was a military monarchical rule, and that eventually became a monarchy, right? In 1979, the Shah was toppled again by the IRGC, which is the Islamic Republic, right? And they set up the Islamic Republic of Iran in 1979. Now, what happens after this? The IR has existed as a theocracy and an autocracy, right? A theocracy is what it was until the instation of Ayatollah Khameini, because until him it was religious leaders that were holding power. And then after Ayatollah Khameini, it became an autocracy where he became a supreme leader. The concept of a supreme leader was introduced and it became an autocracy. Now, what happens under a theocracy or an autocracy is that a lot of the individual freedoms of people is lost, right? And that is essentially what we saw in Iran, and that led to the fourth revolution, which started last year, where Iranian people started protesting against the government.
Sorry, one question. Third revolution, was it the Islamic Republic that toppled it, or were they just a part of the whole revolution?
They toppled it.
Oh, they were the...
Yeah.
It was led by Ali Khamenei.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was Khameini who came.
Yeah. Khamenei was the one that
Now
came.
it was Khameini.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like a group effort, and then the Islamists took over after.
No. It was just them leading the revolution.
Okay.
Yeah. So now, when we understand this particular, series of events, we get into mind what the three major groups involved in the conflict are. Right? In the new fourth revolution, there are three groups. So what makes the Iranian revolution confusing is whether the people want to topple Khamenei, whether they want US intervention, or whether they want democracy. So those are three major questions.
Before we get into that, you want to explore the political structure, because we were contesting whether or not it's a theocracy.
Correct. So he says it's a theocracy, and I say it's an autocracy.
I think it's an autocracy.
Right?
We'll give both our arguments.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think it's a theocracy because there are a lot of groups within Iran as well with a lot of vested interests. When you're looking at somebody like Pezeshkian, he is the president of Iran, and he's not a puppet. He's actively representing the interests of the multiple actors in the region. What he cannot do is override the supreme leader, which is Khomeini. So he cannot go behind his back and say this is the new take on nuclear strategy, or this is how we should, or who we should be going to war is. He's actively affecting domestic policy. He's actively taking care of people's interests. And given the fact that there is some sort of a religious authority looming over them, is what makes me feel like it's a factionalized to an extent. But it's a theocracy.
With me, the counter argument will be to observe countries like China and North Korea, where also there is a president in power who has gotten their power through a certain kind of political system, right? Be it a democratic election, inside party election, whatever method they use, and they have certain nominal powers, but they cannot supersede the supreme leader. And that is the situation with Iran as well. That is why, to me, it seems like a autocracy. Yeah.
But again, as he said, Iran is like run with the Islam itself, the religion.
Absolutely.
It makes it more like a religion run rather than China and North Korea.
Correct. So so the presence of religion there, to me, it exists as a state tool. So it governs what law looks like. So Islam governs the formation of law. However, Islam doesn't govern the interests. So if there's a threat to Khamenei, right, or to Khomeini, right, what ends up happening is that threat is considered more valuable than a threat to Islam. Because at the end of the day, now if Saudi Arabia were to...
We know that?
Sure. We do. Because that explains the entire Shia-Sunni conflict to us. So to me, it seems like sectarianism again has more value than religious authority there.
But that sectarianism is also religious.
It's also
Correct.
religious.
Yeah.
It is religious in its founding, right? However, that sectarianism also comes with political interest. At the end of the day, what they want to do is to keep that family in power.
But it's not a very good equivalence, but like, couldn't you say that ever since even the Rashidun Umayyad days, the Caliph was kind of both political and
Exactly.
Absolutely.
That is my entire argument. The caliphate was fallen.
No, but only if you see it, they're protecting Khomeini because he's a Shia.
Yeah, exactly.
What makes
Right?
it
He is the leader of the
And now political mobilization will be claimed as jihad only.
Yeah, exactly.
To whatever extent.
Yeah.
So I mean,
That's
I
exactly
feel
what
like in this difference between theocracy and autocracy, we may be pulling hairs.
I agree. It is very intertwined for us to say it is one and not the other.
Yeah.
Right? But essentially, where I'm coming for the autocracy part is that there is no caliph.
When you were like, why are we having this discussion? For all you know, fucking Iran is calling itself democratic.
Yeah, exactly. So at the end of the day, what Iran identifies as a democracy, right?
But that's
So
delusion.
that's the thing. So at the end of the
It's
day,
just an educated inquiry we are trying to make.
So what we need to think of essentially is that if Islam gives the supreme authority or the divine right to rule to the caliph, and the caliphate no longer exists, right? Iran does not claim to be the caliphate. That is one thing you have to keep in mind. If there is any country that is claiming to be a caliphate, it's Turkey, right? So Turkey claims they are descendants of the Ottomans, so they are effectively the caliphate. But the president of Turkey is not a Muslim, right? So essentially, that's where the idea of a religious authority or divine authority lacks. So for something to be theocracy, there needs to be divine authority, and there is no divine authority that can be seen in Iran explicitly. But there is religious influence into the autocracy as well. The autocracy stands only because there is a theocratic.
Would it be too dismissive to say then that the disagreement you have is very minor?
It is.
In the sense that like it is an autocracy, but they would see it as a theocracy because they see that their autocracy
is exactly.
So
yeah. So at the end of the day, it is both, right? It is just understanding which of it is more allows us to understand what groups and where we stand.
Well, then it's probably more of an autocracy than a theocracy, right?
Exactly. So that helps my argument of understanding.
Like, they would consider that more than their religious arguments in
Yes.
like a world that is very cutthroat and capitalist.
Absolutely.
Right?
I would disagree, but I think we'll reserve.
We'll reserve that. Yeah, we'll come to that. So essentially, what that allows us to do is understanding whether it's a theocracy or autocracy is that it allows us to classify groups. Now, some people will say it is the Islamic group that is one group, but I will say it's not an Islamic group. It is the IRGC supporters, right? So they want the IRGC to stay in power. They want Khameini to stay in power. So they were the ones that were counter protesting the rising revolution in Iran, right? And that is one group that we are very sure of that exists. Okay, these people want Khameini in power because they believe that the IRGC has the authority. Now, whether that authority comes from religion or not is where the theocracy versus autocracy debate falls. Now, the other two groups are not affected by this at all. There's the democratist group, right? The groups that want to reinstate a democracy, they wanted to topple the government through democratic means, right? That is the majority of the revolution, right? And that includes the ethnic people of Iran, which are effectively your Parsis, your Zoroastrian communities, your all these other ethnic groups that have existed in Iran for several years.
So when Mahsa Amini died in 2022, the protests were majorly led by
this group. Exactly, right? So they wanted to set up so they were the ones that brought Mossadegh into power as well, right? So this is the majority group, and then there's a third group, which is what I would call the Iranian Jews, right? But it's very reductionist to call them as all Jews, because I'm pretty sure there are several Iranian Jews that also want a democracy. But this is a CIA, Mossad-led.
These are people who want to reinstate the Shah.
Because it benefits USA and
more than Iranian Israeli.
Exactly, pretty much. Yeah. So they want to reinstate the Shah because the Shah would open the oil markets to USA, right? So that is the three groups. Now the main group that started the protest was hijacked by these two groups, and that confused everything for all of us, right? Because we are like, okay, we don't want Iran to fall because that will give Western domination in the Middle East. Or then we're like, oh, we want Iran to fall because the people are getting oppressed by Iran, right? So the only solution to that is if the Iranian people rise in protest and set up a democratic system for themselves. But we were confused out of it. We were made to think, okay, maybe the Shah is the better of two evils.
Yeah.
We were forced into a question of better of two evils when there are three options, right? It kind of erased the entire third option of the people self-governing themselves, right? And that gives us an idea of the contemporary situation of the public, opinion in Iran, right? So, do the people want USA and Israel to intervene? No, because their kids are in the school, and those schools are the ones that are getting bombed, right? So they don't want that. but then at the same time, the groups that are pro-West want that because that makes the entire process faster. Right. So that gives us an idea of the three groups that are there in Iran today.
So when there was an internet blackout and you guys kept seeing your internet, your social media blowing up in 2022, that wasn't really Iranians. That was the diaspora that was in other parts of the world.
Not just 2022, even last year.
But we're not saying that their claims were not justified. Like women suffering under the morality police is completely a cause that we would stand against. But we also need to understand that that dissent to an extent was manufactured by the West.
Exactly. So when you think about it, it's very similar to the situation in India. In India, there are freedoms for women, right? They are protected by law and the women enjoy those freedoms. But are they truly free? No. Because at the end of the day, there are social norms and social structures and religious structures that constantly oppress them. Right. And the situation was the same with Iran with a little more policing of the same, right? The police would get involved. If they see women driving on the roads, most situations they're fine. But then randomly, if a cop wants to harass them, they will come, and they were backed with state authority to do so, right? And that is the problem. And when we look at the diaspora, it's a very important question to keep in mind. The people that leave Iran, are they going back?
Yeah.
No, they will, exactly, right? So they will not go back. They've got a better life in the West. They don't want to go back. So then what they want for Iran, is it something we should take into account at all? Right? If it's a country that they're never going to go back to, it's a country that's not going to affect them, the policies of which are never going to affect them, then what exactly are they protesting for?
And there were parts of the protest which are like Israeli flags.
Exactly.
On, right?
That is crazy.
If you look about it, a lot of Indians who live in India do not want to come.
Exactly. So if they sit and
opportunity, this is opportunity.
And that is amazing. That's a very good approach to take. But what I'm saying is, when you go to another country, you shouldn't be the face of the policies of the country. Right? So think about it. When an Indian goes abroad, should what that Indian who's living abroad, enjoying the benefits of being abroad, be able to decide what the poor farmer in India is going to get? No, because they will never understand the reality of what it's like to be in India, right? And the same goes for Iran. So we need to not give credibility to protests that happen outside of Iran, right? When it comes to the conflict that's happening in Iran, we should focus entirely on the protest that is happening in Iran. But what happens is, because there was an internet blackout, we couldn't see it. We couldn't see what was happening. Now, I had friends who are in Iran, who are part of my NGO, who used to use VPNs to try and contact, and they would go no contact for months, and we don't know if they're alive. I've had a friend, the last time she contacted me was 3 months ago, right? And she told me that, what she told me was, I hope that the revolution starts. I hope that we're able to take them over. Just keep checking in on me every week. If I don't respond for a while, maybe talk to someone, right? Maybe let people know. And then she didn't respond to me. It's been 3 months since she responded to me. I have informed the Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, and they have started investigations. They have started journalist reports. We're trying to find out if she and her family are okay, right? And that is the reality of Iran. Because of the internet blackouts, a lot of people would just simply disappear from the face of the earth if you can't actually go see them. I hope she's fine. I think she might be as well. But we can't know for sure until I'm able to hear from her, right? Until she texts me and says, hey, you know what, everything is okay. I don't know. Yeah. And it's been 3 months. We're still looking for her. Hopefully she's okay. But that is the reality of the war. The people living in there want something else entirely. And that is what we need to be able to take into account when also considering the war. Because they are the primary people being affected, right? They are the ones living the war. But we also can take into account what we want, what we see as outcomes. But unless and until we look at the human cost of war that the people that are facing the war are going through, we won't really be able to assess what we really want, right? Because I don't think anyone really wants benefits at the cost of human life, right? We don't want the people there to die so that our prices get cheaper, or we are able to buy more weapons, right? That is not something that we want. So that is essentially what we'll be looking at, and the human cost will come back to when we talk about India, right? And hopefully you guys have more things to add to it, and we will for now just go into the realist war perspective of things.
That being said, our approach will for even India is still going to be extremely realist.
Yeah.
But that does not mean that we're trying to discount the lives of the people who are involved in the war.
So realist school of thought. So basically James Morgenthau basically presented this school of thought, and he's just like, hey, all that matters is national interest. So we're looking at it from a national interest perspective because it's easier to look at it like that. I don't think.
But I think that is too simplified.
It is too simplified.
But
which is where the nuance of you guys come.
It helps you justify the rationale of states that choose to put themselves first. So that is why when we're talking India, I'm not going to say we and us. I'm going to talk about India from a third view perspective, looking at it
as a organism, the state organism.
Yes, as the actor that is going to try to put its national interest first, basis the cards it has been dealt.
Yes.
That is the approach.
Okay. So we'll get into
just to add on before we move on, the diaspora thing. I had an Iranian on Discord also tell me the diaspora problem gets worse because a big problem with diaspora people in general, not just Iran, is that over time, the longer they stay away from the country, the more they don't realize that things on the ground have completely changed.
This Patrick Bet-David dude, have you seen his tapes these days?
No, I have not.
He is so pro-West. This man is never going to go to Iran. And the way he talks is just sad, man.
Yeah.
And he's been trying to get this Professor Jiang onto his thing. And all his latest videos are in the same style as Professor Jiang. So he's got a whiteboard in the back and he's trying to explain.
But that's the same thing with Jiang as well, right? The Jiang is also a Chinese man who was educated in Yale. So his entire perspective is very Western centric.
I also find that very compelling because I feel like we all also know, like in general, NRI parents and stuff, they are very much stuck in the time period of India that they left
exactly
where they are now.
Absolutely.
I would say boomers who grew up here are more ahead than boomers who are NRI. And stuff. So the diaspora problem becomes
a very big issue because you don't really understand the ground reality.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll come back to this, and moving on, we'll look at the axis of resistance, right? It's a very interesting topic for me because several crisis committees I've done have revolved around it. So the axis of resistance today looks like this, right? We have Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, right? These three groups, I will not call them terrorists here, right? Because the Indian government has not declared any of these groups terrorists. And for that reason, I don't have any reason to call them terrorists either. The Indian government recognizes them as armed groups, and I will also be referring to them as armed groups. These armed groups are basically fighting for whatever they call their rights, right? They enlist their rights. In Palestine, Hamas looks at the right to self-determination. In Lebanon, Hezbollah looks at the right to Islamic order, which I don't really see the point of. Yes. But fair enough. Me not being able to see does not make it any less justified. It's just that is what they stand for. And then in Yemen, the Houthis want to again self-determination, right? So these are groups that are armed. They're using armed processes. Does them using violence discount their need for self-determination? Probably not, because most self-determination processes have been violent. But because I come from a country that gained its independence through non-violence, I will say maybe there is some merit to it, but we will look into that through takes when we open the floor. But when we look at the axis of resistance, we need to understand that the axis of resistance does not have any legitimate support. And that legitimate support was what Iran provided. Iran started training these groups. Iran started arming these groups. I will not say for Hamas because there is no evidence of a link between Iran and Hamas. Iran has only provided aid to Palestinian people at most. But there has been definitive links for Hezbollah and Houthis, which Iran itself has clarified.
Also, right? Sidebar, Hamas is Sunni.
Yeah, Hamas is a Sunni group, right? Whereas Houthis and Hezbollah are Shia groups. So Iran has directly military trained Hezbollah. Iran has provided arms and ammunition to Houthis. So does Iran have vested interests in these two countries? Absolutely, right? But their vested interest, their national interest, also allows for these people to realize their self-determination. But if we agree to it, if we conform to that, then we can also conform to US vested interest in Iran, which means that they can gain the Iranian people can gain their self-determination. So that is not something that we should be doing. So a state's vested interest should not trump the people's right to self-determination, the people's right to free governance, right? So at the end of the day, what matters in the axis of resistance is no matter how much Iran has provided for these other countries, the fact that they're oppressing their own people is a very important thing to keep in mind, and we need to be able to be empathetic towards the Iranian people, right? And that also helps us understand the dynamic of war there, right? So the axis of resistance is one side of the entire war, right? And the other side is effectively the Western-led Saudi Arabia bloc, right? So Saudi Arabia acts as a US proxy, Iran acts as a Russian proxy. So at the end of the day, the Middle East is one large proxy war battleground, remnant of the Cold War. Okay, so that lets us understand what the axis of resistance look like. Do you want to take over? With the escalation ladder?
Yeah. So the law of escalation basically means having a proportionate or slightly higher than proportionate response in response to an attack. So basically, say you and a friend get into a fight. You first have a conflict which is verbal, then maybe one person pushes the person, so the other person pushes harder. Then they punch, the other person punches back. You pull out a knife, you pull out a knife, they pull out a gun, you pull out a gun, you pull out a bazooka, the other person pulls out a bazooka until we eventually get to a nuclear bomb being blasted on the other. That's what the law of escalation would say, that there should be a proportionate response. I'm going to walk you guys through Iran's escalation ladder first, and then maybe US's escalation ladder. This is from a very foundational understanding of game theory. So to start off, you have proxy wars. This is the most preferable method of entertaining conflict. It's something Iran would prefer the most. So that is through having arming and training proxy groups like Hezbollah, and trying to have smaller wars in the region, very inspired by Cold War war strategy. That is how it had essentially started out, and that's what we saw essentially in the start when there was an Iranian and Israeli conflict, because both of them would prefer a proxy war rather than a direct confrontation, because it's cost effective and at the same time it shows a certain degree of aggression. But this is something that effectively stopped around October 7th, 2023. The next stage would be some direct exchange, but a degree of restraint that has been practiced. So back in 2022, when we saw our Twitter accounts blowing up with drone footage, basically what we found out that Iranian military had already made sure that Israel was aware of the attacks through back channels and some degree of announcement that there was going to be an attack. 99% of all the drone strikes were stopped and countered through anti-missiles by Israel. So basically, it was just a show of strength, saying that we can get to your most vulnerable places. We didn't see a lot of footage coming from Israel, mainly because it was illegal for you to take a video and post it online. So for us to assume that only Iranian military bases were being attacked is not entirely true. Israel was also being attacked. It's just that the Iron Dome was working at its full capacity, and 99% of the drones were stopped. So it's basically a show of strength, and it is also like it's something war strategy. You guys will find out that the more I read, the more parallels I'm able to draw it with all forms of combat, for that matter, be it boxing, be it sport or football, be it swords. You basically check. It's called trying to figure your range out. Boxers often do that. They don't throw a punch. They throw a punch at like 20% strength just to be able to figure out how far their hand can reach, and also get a glimpse of how far the opponent's hand can reach you. And that is essentially what direct exchange with restraint would basically mean. Yeah, it's basically called what economists and strategists call costly signaling, where both sides take action that have an exit ramp clear on both sides. So Israel basically signaled that we can penetrate Iranian air defensive and these sensitive areas if we want so, and while Iran is saying that we also have a degree of ballistic missile capability. After that is something that you're talking about, the nuclear threshold. Very important to understand, Iran is not a nuclear power. It just has capability of uranium enrichment. It's not a weapon, but it's a step that gets you to nuclear weapons. Please understand that the gap between uranium enrichment and actually getting weapons grade nuclear is a huge jump, but it signals the capability of being halfway there. Okay, now this threshold is something that a lot of neighboring countries, that if they are an enemy to your country, would use as an excuse to up their military budget, because it becomes justifiable to the public to say that these guys might be a nuclear power, so we have to make sure that we're completely armed and ready as well. And that's something that India has been doing all this while as well, right? Because there is a threat of Pakistan arming and increasing its nuclear capability, and therefore we also must have to remain prepared, and that justifies the cost to the public. And otherwise there would be an outrage saying, why are you spending so much on military, spend more on healthcare and education and food.
Let's look at the nuclear enrichment a little, right? So essentially where Iran has reached right now is at 60% uranium enrichment. Okay, you need 90% uranium enrichment for you to be able to be nuclearly armed, to produce nuclear weapons. But even if you reach 90% enrichment, the materials required to make a nuclear bomb is again a whole other set of technology that you need to be able to get. Now 60 to 90% might feel like it's only 30%, right? But getting to that 30% is insanely hard, right? Because for energy use, you need uranium at about 13-14% enrichment.
Correct.
Okay, so once you get to 13-14% enrichment, you have energy use. Now, what Iran is claiming is that we want 60% enrichment. Why? Because that allows it to efficiently use nuclear energy. Right. So where is India right now? We're at 90% uranium enrichment very easily, and we are utilizing that enrichment to power nuclear reactors. Right, we're generating nuclear energy in India. A lot of countries are doing that, and especially NATO countries are all capable of nuclear enrichment. It's just that the NATO charter does not allow them to own nuclear weapons. They have to share it with the US. Right. However, they are all having like 60-70% enrichment, which gives them a lot of free energy. Now, Iran is being handicapped there, which is their argument. They're like, why will you put such a small threshold on me when other countries are allowed to produce nuclear weapons that way? Yeah. And that created something called as the JCPOA, wherein they agreed to the IAEA coming in and monitoring the enrichment, provided they get to reach 60%, so that they can produce enough energy to not be energy dependent. Right. And the entire conflict with regard to Iran escalated around there when USA pulled from the JCPOA. Right. So JCPOA had 6 countries involved. Right. We have the P5+1 essentially. Right. So we had USA, UK, France, and Germany on one side, and then Russia and China as a countermeasure. Okay. So out of these 4 countries that are part of the JCPOA, Russia and China are not part of JCPOA. They're just countermeasures. Right. So these 4 countries, that is USA, Germany, France, and UK. When USA, which is a major power, pulls out, what ends up happening is Iran has to still hold up the treaty to these 3 other countries, while also facing the sanctions that USA is putting on them. So that becomes a handicap on both sides, right? So that is what led to Iran just being like, hey, fuck you guys, we're going to do whatever we want, right? And it to that extent, it just feels like a huge geopolitical failure, right? And that lets us understand the escalation rungs as well.
Correct.
Take over.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Uni. Actually, you explained it better than I could have. Also, sidebar, if Iran does maintain and hold its threat for becoming a nuclear power, which I don't think it's trying to do, it's just trying to stay close to the threshold, like Uni said, I feel like Saudi Arabia would also have an excuse to go
for it. Exactly.
All scale. So that's one thing. Anyways, coming back to the escalation menu, then you have full escalation where you have direct conflict. Now, this direct conflict can be political, can be economic, can be military. I'll give you guys the escalation ladder of what has already happened and a predictive scale of where things could be going. This is completely from predictive history. I completely agree with what Professor Jiang said in it, because it's a very, very true game theorist claim on the situation, and he's not been wrong with his predictions till now. So, first you've got attacking the GCC. Very clever move by Iran, because realistically, because say when you're attacking a country like a Dubai or when you're attacking a country like the UAE or Qatar or Saudi, what you're basically trying to signal is that we can affect your country's health economically without getting into a direct escalation or a full-blown war with you. 90% of Dubai's population is foreigners. What happens when you blow up a Fairmont? Foreigners are going to want to go back, and they're going to know that keeping their money in Dubai is not completely safe as it used to be, say, 5 months ago. Now, the entire goal is to basically cripple the economic strengths of the GCC, which is then backing the US stock market, which is then currently backing the AI bubble. And we all know when the AI bubble bursts, there's going to be a huge stock market crash. So you are going to have to rely on the petrodollar to prop up the stock market to a certain extent. And with the GCC less involved in the US stock market, there is a high chance that the US economy suffers at a much larger scale. And that's also going to want the GCC to also move its assets elsewhere and get into some degree of a negotiation with Iran, like it got into a normalization agreement with Israel, to be able to maintain its trade to a certain degree, because you have to bow to the new hegemon in the Middle East. That's one. So the second would be the Strait of Hormuz closure, where we'll also continue to discuss further in the economic section of everything. But to basically sum up everything on the whole, is that with I think Houthi ships are anti-ship missiles are the ones that are giving the threat to the area. What you can do is basically now these Houthi ships could be like, you know what, if you want to trade through us, pay us a tax. or maybe bribe us to an extent, or maybe get into a normalization agreement to continue your trade. An alternate could be the Red Sea route, an alternate could be the Cape of Good Hope route, but that's obviously going to have a 10, 20, 30% expense. And I just got this verified by Oni. If you're going around the strait, or if you're going around the Cape of Good Hope to continue trading, it's adding $1 to $2 million in fuel alone. And that is not going to show up in economic sanctions. That's going to show up in the invoice of the Indian exporter who is trying to send something from Tirupur. So that's the funny part of everything. Anyways, you want to add something?
Yeah, Tirupur reminded me. If you go to Tirupur today, all these exporters and manufacturers, they have started selling their commodities on the floor. If you go to the roads there, you can find clothes just on the ground, and you can buy them for 20, 30, 40 rupees right now, because they are not able to, the excess cost of sending it through the Cape of Good Hope is not worth it for them. So they might as well, yeah, so they're just trying to save what they can. So that's how badly it has affected the economy. Continue, yeah.
Right. So then after that, the logical thing would be to have attacks on infrastructure. Now, the biggest infrastructure, let's understand that nothing grows as such in the Middle East. It's the land is rather infertile. They import a lot of their food. They import a lot of their water. Um, right now, a lot of these GCCs have built desalination plants where they're desalinizing the water and making it usable for humans. Now, by attacking these plants, what the what Iran is essentially signaling is that your source of life is going to be destroyed by us, and that is something that could actually be a huge bargaining factor when it comes to being able to get into peace negotiations much later on. So that is one thing. So essentially, you start military, attack economically, and then you attack infrastructure. After which, that is basically the extent of Iranian escalation goes, because they don't really have secret weapons, they don't really have bio weapons, they don't really have nuclear weapons. So these are not options that are viable for Iran, but these are options that are very viable for the US. The US economic trajectory, before we get into US, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to, sorry, very kind of unrelated, but do any of these countries actually rely on desalination plants?
Yes.
So they're very expensive, right?
Yeah, they do, but unfortunately they rely heavily on it.
They rely heavily.
Yeah, that is their major source of drinking water.
Okay.
Means the water.
Because I know the process is very expensive.
Very expensive. Anything. Also, that's exactly why water is very expensive in these countries. So when I used to live in the Gulf, buying 1 can of water used to cost about 1 riyal. And 1 riyal would also get me 2 weeks of groceries.
Yeah, 1 riyal.
So 1 can of 20 liters of water would cost me the same as 2 weeks of groceries. Whereas in India, 2 weeks of groceries will be around 1,500 rupees, and 1 can of water will be 25 rupees right now. So that's the difference in water cost. Yeah.
So coming to the escalation ladder of the US, they essentially, the Middle East playbook is first have a decapitation strike, which we already saw. Sadly, they did not get the president, and the president is essentially still calling the shots, saying that we will retaliate. That was the first tweet after the attack had happened. Second is that there will be direct military-based attacks. We've already witnessed those as well. Third would be a comprehensive economic embargo tightening. We're feeling the after effects of that in the process as well. The LPG and the petroleum and how these industries are separate and how their attacks are separate as well is something that Uni and I will clarify in the economic section of today's session. Essentially, the next would be attack critical infrastructure. That is something that we're already saying. Tehran is currently covered in black smoke. That is essentially the next scale. That is currently where the US is at right now. By attacking infrastructure, it's currently trying to blow up oil plants. The next extreme, these are getting to the extreme ends, would be first the use of secret weapons. There is no known usage of secret weapons being used against Iran as of now. After which you have the use of bioweapons and chemical weapons, which is also something which we have not seen historically. And after which comes the talk of nuclear weapons. And Professor Jiang would claim that unless and until we are at the stage of talking bioweapons, the possibility or the threat of a nuclear war is not even on the table right now. And half these countries will not want to get to that point, because war is never about who wins at the end of the day. War is about who loses less. So we always need to look at mitigation of loss at the end of the day. That's how we truly define who comes out on top in the war, if there ever is a winner. So
secret weapons would essentially be stuff like mobile drones. So essentially, what happens? They start attacking your mobile phones. So they will send high frequency waves to your phones, and they'll explode in your hands. Right, things like that. So or
Have you
there will
seen
be
Kingsman?
Oh yes.
yeah.
Those are secret weapons.
Essentially, whatever is around us will be turned into weapons.
So
Effectively.
all these thriller movies are using secret weapons. You got Mission Impossible. All the secret weapons are over there. Those
Basically,
capsules,
Yeah.
viruses. So like you could like just poison a water plant
Yeah.
that's supplying water to a lot of people. You could be drinking it and then you'd be falling sick. That could be a chemical weapon. Secret weapons could be viruses in your phone. Pegasus could be known as a secret
Yeah.
weapon. So essentially, equipment like this, which we know for a fact that are already
They're
there.
there.
Do sleeper cells count as secret
Yes,
weapons?
they do. But essentially, suicide bombers
Suicide bombers
are secret weapons
Oh.
because they're sleeper cells. So essentially, suicide bombers are hidden civilians. They will start detonating without knowing.
But they're also militants.
Not necessarily always.
This is actually real though. Do they actually never know or like?
Yeah, you will never know.
Oh, so in that
So what happens is if you're like
terrorists just walking.
Yeah. Like
so
these are people that are planted into countries that will eventually just start
But they
detonating.
all know that they're flying.
no, I'll show you how it works. I'll tell you how
It's
it works.
like Batman, the Dark Knight.
Yeah.
I'll tell you how it works. So basically, if you're in Russia and you want to activate a sleeper cell in USA, what you'll start when the kid is maybe 6 or 7 years old. You'll take consent from the parents, take those kids away, keep them in some hidden no man's land in Russia. They grow up in a proper American town. They grow up speaking English, the American accent. They eat American food. They study American culture. They watch American movies.
And then they go to America.
And then they're in America with an American passport. So
And
you
they
will not be able to distinguish between somebody because they've been raised like that as well.
But then how do you also get these people to do such extravagant?
Because they've been brainwashed from a young age.
They could
So
just-
in
they could be
between them
trafficked.
being
Yeah.
raised with American culture, like,
Yeah.
they're like being fed.
Yes,
Yeah.
they are. They're being fed propaganda and ideology throughout.
Are we actually this advanced?
Oh
in
yeah.
psychological manipulation?
We have been for the past 70 years now.
I
You
mean,
know,
it's
a
just
lot-
movies.
A lot of
seen MK Ultra, right? You know what
The MK Ultra was a failure though. They didn't actually succeed in doing
a lot of
like
Indian.
they hurt a lot of people, but in the process of trying to control people, but all they did was kill people.
That's all they want to do now.
Yeah, that's what they want. Right?
Yeah, but we're talking about actually full on controlling people
Yeah.
and they're not even realizing that they're under the influence of something.
It's very
and
normal.
That's
Yeah.
a real thing.
That happens in
When
Pakistan.
you're just born, like that's your entire world.
Yeah. Okay.
So I agree. I think what I'm struggling to understand here is how we can somehow raise a human being to understand all these cultures, but also feed them like this. That's when it sounds like it goes to fiction.
Motherland.
Like
That's-
feed them like stuff like, oh, but like eventually you're going to kill something. Like,
Yeah.
how do we do that?
Yeah,
Because
but
they're
that's
taught
the entire
great. Yeah,
world,
they're
like-
taught that way to they prioritize their motherland over everything.
I guess if you have them
Nationalism.
from a young age and
Yeah.
control everything they see and perceive,
Yeah.
I guess you could do a lot of. It just sounds very.
It is
Like
very dystopian.
Pavlov's dog theory.
Yeah.
How
They,
you train or how you essentially train a dog.
Because I thought I always thought that sleeper agents are just people who are really good actors and
No,
and slip into the role. Every
No.
day.
They are
And then
people
one
that
day
are
they're just
manipulated.
they do the deed, and the closest thing we had to sleeper cells was the CIA making school shooters, but they're not like brainwashed.
No,
from
the closest
birth.
thing we have had is ISIS.
Yeah, wait. Oh well, that's
Yeah, things like ISIS, Lashkar-e-Taiba.
But
you know?
ISIS is still again ISIS is like radicalized people who are it's like
They
fascism,
radicalize
like,
children.
Fascist supporters are usually people who want communism but are too dumb to realize that, and they're like, no, you want fascism. So I thought like ISIS was the same, but like,
No,
obviously
no.
they are assets of Mossad now.
Exactly.
But the way they did it was that like radicalized people who have been traumatized by the horrors of the war are like misled. I didn't know that they were actually making sleeper agents.
Yeah.
Like, oh
Yeah.
my god, that's okay. That's something to absorb now.
You know, a lot of these secret agents are not people who are diehard patriots since they were born. They may be people on death row
Death row, yeah.
who have nothing to lose and have been given a second shot at life, and that gives them more added motivation to be able to serve their
That
country.
makes
That's
them
still,
efficient,
that
right?
still
Exactly.
makes more
Correct.
sense to me
And
than
that makes them
someone being
efficient.
raised from as a child.
Yeah.
Like,
That is very
I
normal.
did not know we could do
Yeah.
that to humans.
That's realism.
I didn't know. Okay.
To use it without having any morality involved in it and to be able to be accepting as
on
humans.
your MK Ultra point, I was always worried about that. Like, what if the MK Ultra experiments that were all failures and suicides, quote unquote, stop because they figured it out?
Yeah.
Maybe they figured it out,
Yeah,
I guess.
pretty much.
Okay, so.
Yeah. It's very hard for us to have concrete evidence, but there is enough evidence
we don't
for us
know
to
for sure.
understand that it's being used.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, shit, that's scary.
We know it's happening, but we don't know to the extent that which
That
it's
to
happening.
extent, yeah.
But yeah, to have that as a possibility on the escalation ladder is completely rational. Yeah. So right, and these are options that have not been publicly discussed. Now, the talk of a ground invasion into Iran is something that I see completely on the books. It's something that Uni does not see on the books. It's a contestation we have. We'll present both our points to you, so you guys can draw a rationale for yourself. So recently there was a briefing at the White House with the Gang of Eight. It's basically 8 senators, 8 people from the Congress are being briefed on what is going on. And the senator of Connecticut, he did a press conference when he came out, and he said that I've been left with a lot more questions than answers. There have been talks of sending our sons and daughters into Iran, and there is talks of a military budget. Now, when there is talks of a military budget, it implies that it is open-ended. That means there is no signal from the US that they plan on de-escalating in the war. Okay, that is one thing to know. And the second that I wanted to talk about was one was military and second was the cost. Yeah, these were the two things that are completely on the books. That's my analysis of what the press interview was. Um, it seems completely justified as well. I don't think it's not something that's on the books, because the cost pyramid of a normal military versus the cost pyramid of a US military is something that is completely the opposite of what a conventional one would look like. Because for normal militaries, the Air Force would be the most expensive and therefore the least used. But the US basically starts from the Air Force, then the Navy, and artillery, and then infantry.
Yes, it is. So Air Force is the cheapest, then it's the Navy, and then it's ground units.
No, then is artillery, then is
artillery, and then ground units. So essentially, why I would say the ground invasion is not likely is because of the cost of it. Right, the primary reason is the cost of it. Moving from the United States of America to the Middle East is insanely expensive, because we have to move like 100,000 foot soldiers. That is easily taking like 70% of your naval capacity.
There was hints of a conscription.
Yeah,
that is something that I wanted to say.
So they are saying that there could be conscription, and I'm not saying it's impossible, because it has happened in
US.
Yeah, so it's happened in Vietnam, it's happened in Iraq, so it could very well happen in Iran. It's just that it's going to be infinitely more.
Like, in response to the
Iran, yes, yeah.
So, what's the chances of a national draft?
Very low, in my opinion.
I think it's pretty high. I think it's pretty high.
Exactly.
And I think if it happens, then you've got another Syria happening, and this conflict is going to go on for another 5 to 10 years.
But why I think it wouldn't happen is simply because the moment conscription happens, Donald Trump is losing his.
He's losing his seat for sure.
Because midterms are very close, and I don't think he's going to take something like that, because the moment the American people are like, we have to send our kids for war, they are flipping out. They're like, no. Right, it's going to be another Reagan-Nixon situation.
He is literally a senile man.
Yeah.
So at this point, we have to think about what his handlers will think.
Exactly. So they don't want him to change. Yeah. So
you think his handlers don't want him to change?
No. Right now, because he's the face of the party, they don't want that changing right now.
Okay.
Because you can see the amount of investment they're trying to make into opening a third term, right? So to me, it just feels like conscription.
Do you think that's a bluff? I think they might be trying to ditch him now.
No, they can't.
I think even if there was another midterm, there's going to be another capital as well. So I don't know to what extent, and I'm worried that if there is a third term, we might never see Trump go.
Yeah,
that is another concern. But I think we'll leave that conversation
for another time.
Yeah. Okay. So another thing that I wanted to talk about was that I think Iran is going to come out on top. He thinks US is going to come out on top. I'll give you my reasons why. Uni will give you his reasons why. The decision is yours to make. My first thing is that the war is way more costly for the US to sustain for a longer period of time than it is to Iran. There's something known as a THAAD anti-missile. It's a battery unit. It costs $300 million. And a single missile shot costs $1 million. This is to counter the drones, which are the Shahed drones, or Shahed drone or Shahad drone, I don't know how to say it.
Couple $100,000.
Which cost $50,000, not even couple $100,000. $50,000 only. To take down one $50,000 drone, you're shooting multiple 1 million, because there's a good chance that one doesn't hit it. So you have to shoot 3 or 4. Multiple millions on 50,000, and it produces 500 drones a day, Iran. You've got them hidden in places that you wouldn't know. And Iran is a mountainous region, so you can have them hidden within these mountains and secret locations. You don't know where the attacks are coming from. And now that they're backed by Russian intelligence, that there's an even higher chance of there being accurate attacks, which we have been seeing. So for me, in the long term, it's not very costly because there's multiple methods of Iran trying to economically arm twist the US. One being this, the second being the attacks onto the GCC, which is affecting the stock market back in the US, and the third being the Strait of Hormuz. And that basically is going to arm twist the hegemon of the Middle East itself, because you're going to want to bow to the powers in the region. Professor Jiang also said that Israel secretly wants US to lose the war so that Iran and Israel can then be the hegemons in the region as well. We saw a lot of clips that I would love to show you guys afterwards, because it's mind blown me. I was watching it this morning, so it's not a part of today's session script, but it's something that I want to talk to you guys about. So maybe we'll put it up on the projector afterwards. So yeah.
Okay, so let us look at why I think US will come on top, right? To counter all of these arguments.
Before that,
No, there's one argument. War of attrition.
Oh yeah, that's another. Okay, yeah.
also remember to counter the Iran-Israel hegemon.
Yeah,
I also do not agree with that.
Yeah.
That is something I don't want to cover in the session.
will cover it
prepare my
separately.
arguments for it.
We'll discuss that when the floor is open. Okay, so let us just look at the cost of war, right? So cost of war, absolutely, right? The ratio, when you look at it liberally, I think Sid looks at it as 1 to 6,000. If we're looking at one unit, which is 300 million versus $150,000 unit. But let's look at it a little more realistically, right? I would say 1:1,000, right? So every $1 Iran is spending, US has to spend $1,000. But now let's look at the military budgets, right? Iran's entire GDP is somewhere around a couple $1 billion, okay? Not couple tens, couple hundreds, couple $1 billion. That's it, right? The United States of America's military budget is $1.1 trillion last year. This is higher. It's not come out. They've not announced the military budget. So that ratio is somewhere around 3.5 to 4,000, right? So US has about $3,000 to $4,000 more expendable than Iran does, right? So let us say they're using these high grade weapons that are very costly. Let us say Iran has a bunch of balloons that they're making them waste their weapons on. But when we consider the cost of war as a factor of attrition, Iran will lose, because at the end of the day, their money will run out faster than US's money will, no matter how much the difference in expenses.
So only saying it's the war of attrition. And whoever can go on for longer will come out on top, and the US has more resources to come out on top. But understand that US, if it was only fighting this war alone, then this logic would have been justified.
Yeah,
here you've got the GCC that is going to arm twist the US in the process as well. And my second is that you can lose the war of attrition. I'm not saying that Iran's going to come out on top military strength wise, but you can also win the longer game in the process by using these other factors as well. So you don't have to necessarily win the war of attrition.
In fact, I think I was about to counter with the fact that I think US is also aware, very much aware.
They know their position is unsustainable.
I think the US themselves aren't very confident they're going to win this.
Which is why I'm afraid that there might be a ground intervention, because you want to go through the ladder of escalation as quickly as possible.
But now my counter to that is, for something to be a war of attrition, there should be a counter of losses, right? Now let's think about if the war is actually causing a loss to the United States of America. The reality is that it's not. Is that the past 6-7 decades, what US has finally managed to figure out, right, through the Cold War, is how to make war profitable, right? The war in itself is tied to foundations like BlackRock and other military investors, right, who are generating lots and lots of profits, right? It is not just the military assets that US is buying, right? That will give you a net zero. So US is paying their own companies, those companies are generating profit, those profits are being utilized again in the war, right? But let us say the GCC, Iran, Israel, all of them are buying from the same investors. All of them are buying from the same weapons manufacturers, right? So when these weapons manufacturers are providing weapons for both sides of the war and they're creating multiple amounts of profit, who ends up getting most of the money? The United States of America. So it is not even a war of attrition, because at the end of the day, it becomes a war of profit.
You're actually going to this topic where like there seems to be almost two Americas,
Yeah.
and one of them is hidden underneath the
Exactly.
America as like a shadow player.
Exactly.
Like,
So America going into war is profiting America at the end of the day, because the people that America is going to war against are also buying from the same weapons manufacturers set in America.
Of America.
Please, okay, I'm going to counter that again. This is Uni's assumption that America goes to war to sell weapons. To understand that it sells weapons.
Assumption? I feel like that's a fact.
No, it sells weapons because you show me one war that has happened because of lobbying by weapon sellers.
Palestine.
Okay, then by that logic, let's limit our conversation to Iran-Israel. Okay, when we were talking the 24 drone strikes, April 24 wala drone strike, then technically by that logic, Iran should have supported escalation in the process if it was making money off of it.
Iran is not making money.
US should have told Israel to escalate the war. Why did it propagate de-escalation? You need to understand that there is strategic corridors as well, where the establishment needs to support the war. You are assuming that the lobbyists are making sure that the war goes on so that they make money out of it.
Okay, so there is something called as making sure that the people are also satisfied. So if the US did not, so if the US did not push for de-escalation, they do not have moral standing.
Yeah, they have to also take into account what their people think about the war as well, right? That's not in the money into account. In fact, America would be the elites would be so happy. Americans were just a bunch of drones that just paid and ate and didn't think of it.
Exactly. So America does not go to war to sell weapons; it sells weapons because it goes to war.
They go to war to sell weapons, but they also have to make sure
that it doesn't come off as that.
That
cannot be their official position.
That cannot be their official position.
Right. They do go to war for.
Yeah. Because they can't make it obvious. They can't literally be like, they have to say, why are
you
they pissing in your face? They have to say it's rain. They can't say, I'm pissing in your face.
Yeah.
Like, they have to
so
say
essentially,
it's
you are right that there are institutions that are in place, and those institutions at the end of the day will also govern whether they go to war or not. Right. But that institutions governing them is at the end of the day popular opinion. Right. It's public opinion. So at the end of the day, what they need to do is they need to seem like they're trying to de-escalate, but Iran is not agreeing. Right. Only then can they keep creating their war in just. So this brings us to
why are they trying to make their people so hateful? So that every year they can give less and less excuses for this shit. But because they hate having to make excuses.
I think there's weight to your argument as well, but I wouldn't say that minus.
Agree. Yeah.
Let's try to get more perspectives.
Let's get to any other opinions on that?
Again, when you start about saying that Iran is not going to sustain itself simply because it's economically not possible, is one way of looking at it. But then you look at the fact that if the people of Iran itself start insurging, or they start what do you call
lobbying
after that. That is why I firmly believe that Khomeini's death was not supposed to happen. Because Khomeini, even though the people hate Khomeini, his death would rather unite the people.
Yes, exactly.
If you another example would be Greenland. Now Greenland doesn't want Denmark. But at the same time, they don't want USA. They would rather have Denmark
over USA.
Control them over USA.
Yeah. So that is the thing. So at the end of the day, US has a struggle of maintaining public opinion, right? So they don't want, so that other people don't rise up against them. It is easier for them to make the war profitable when it's contained. But the moment the war stops being contained, it becomes less profitable.
I've seen your counter argument and had that counter argument as well. The argument of then why didn't they do this sooner? I feel like we have to realize that America is always playing this very delicate dance all the time, where the point is that, to make it very simple to understand, if American citizens were just a bunch of people who did not give a shit about what their country was doing and just voted red all the time and ate food and were just brainless drones, America would literally be tearing the world apart right now. The only reason they're not is because the people have to have this delusion
that they're the saviors.
Good guys. They're the good guys.
Again, if you look at it, it's all calculated or rather precedented also. If you see again, how you said it's all proxy warfare between Russia and USA. Go back to Vietnam. You see,
it's again.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same shit.
Here, there was guerrilla warfare. Here, it's hilly areas. There was.
In fact, Vietnam is a very good example to show how much this is not about budget at all and its perception.
Okay, this was asked to me, so I'll ask the same thing. Why I believe, he said commercial interest is not reason. That commercial interest is attributed to national interest. So why would national interest triumph over humanity or the war itself, right? So how many of you over here think what happens in Palestine or Israel is wrong? Like, okay, take Palestine, like the killing of the people in Palestine. I think
Everyone
Yeah, it's
agrees.
not- yeah.
Now, I'll give you an example. If it's same, if a neighboring country attacked our own civilians, let's say again a bus of 30 people, would you be okay with that killing and say, okay, I'm so sorry, this killing happened. Please do not kill, or you quote articles that they are violating. No. What do? You go in, you attack their very own country, you destroy. Why?
Because that's national interest. Exactly.
You are underweighing the
Wait,
cause
wait,
of
what-
de-escalation
where
in the
you-
process. You are underweighing the cause of de-escalation.
But what I'm saying is that
Then by that logic, de-escalation should never be justified.
No.
if you're trying to
De-escalation.
make
No,
money.
I'm not saying that. You have to keep in mind that there are three different actors here. Right? We as people believe de-escalation is amazing. It's important, right? But when for the state war becomes profitable, why will they want to de-escalate? Only because of public opinion will they want to de-escalate. So what I'm saying is there has been a conflation of military interest, national interest, and commercial interest.
And what about economic interest?
Economic interest. So that's the thing, right? If the
Commercial interest, side mein. Commercial interest, we're talking military profit.
Correct. What I'm saying is
Separate
that
that from trade.
no, but when your entire economy is based off of it, right? So let us. Why is USA the largest investor in their defense? Because defense generates the most profit for them. They are the world's largest defense exporter, right? So when they are selling so many weapons, when weapons contribute at around 25-30% of their profits, it becomes their economy.
I don't know.
It is very similar to drug war in Colombia.
But अभी मैंने थोड़ा personal belief mix कर दिया, so we'll edit this out of the video.
Fair enough, it's okay.
But I just genuinely wanted to be.
That is all right,
Wanted to
I
encourage
could
this.
tell this is kind of becoming an actual raw
Anish
conversation.
didn't answer that question. What did you do? National interest. Like I gave you an example.
Yeah,
A bus of 30 people are killed from India by a neighboring country. Would you rather go for de-escalation, or would you go for the
Retaliation.
Only because it's profitable.
not only profitable,
No.
politically more?
No, see,
It's profitable.
I feel like the problem with this example is that like that never happened. So what?
No, it happened in India.
It happened in India.
Palgam.
No, I mean no, that almost never happens. And the point is, this is a very specific context.
Okay, fine.
Where
De-escalation
obviously-
didn't happen in Iraq for the longest. It was extremely profitable for the
I would
states.
say de-escalation is the better thing to do.
But personally, you feel like you have to
just-
retaliate.
Also, practically, it's not obviously not the right answer, though. because
Yeah.
There's probably a reason they're doing that, and unless you address that reason they're doing that, which will probably involve some violence.
Even though I believe morally de-escalation is the right thing, I don't think that would be the best move.
I also don't think that's even possible. Because
And that is why national interest triumphs everywhere.
but
Everything.
again, I have to say, but the problem is this is a hypothetical. Again,
No, this happens very regularly.
a hypothetical in the sense that, like, so even if they say, oh, this happened to India, yeah, from a certain sense, but there's still so much context around everything that's happening. Like, it's not completely
I agree.
devoid of what.
I agree.
Like, obviously, like you can say from a certain perspective, oh, we were attacked for no reason. Yeah, in that specific span of 10 years, but over the history of culture, obviously it's not for no reason.
No, it
There's
was.
things that are happening.
No. So
that
the
are like-
situation with
no, I'm not saying it's justifiable. See, we're not talking about justifiable.
fair enough.
I'm talking about the fact that like
There are other factors influencing
I
it.
want to be clear about what I'm actually trying to.
I agree.
Here. When I'm saying that this hypothetical is too devoid, is a problem that like, yeah, sure, we can be attacked for no reason, but we know, like, we're not surprised when we're attacked by Pakistan for no reason, because it's Pakistan. That in itself is a reason. Like, oh, it's Pakistan. Oh, there's this
but
history and
still-
stuff like
but
that.
still, how does that?
That I'm talking about the how this applies to
no,
hypothetical.
yeah, but like how
So
does that?
in the
different be
hypothetical, I'm talking about my perspective. So the problem with the hypothetical is that already I'm going to be like, okay, what could be a plausible scenario for that to happen? Okay, I am a country that is attacked by 30 people. Well, I'm an Indian, so I'm like, so Pakistan. So I'll start thinking about Pakistan
Makes
and be
sense.
like, well, of course, if. So now,
But if it was- okay.
now I'm not thinking about a hypothetical. I'm thinking
About
about
your own
if
hypothetical.
Pakistan attacks India for no reason. Of course, we can't de-escalate.
Okay, let us take a different situation. Then. Let's adjust that hypothetical little, right? Let us assume Myanmar attacked our border.
Yeah, that's so. First, I'd be like, well, why? Why
Exactly.
the fuck did they do that?
Check if it's
So,
still
but
taping.
obviously, my first response will not be de-escalation because again, it's like, well, why? Why did you do that? Like, I don't know if I can de-escalate. Are you going to de-escalate?
Thank you.
Like,
That's fair.
Back on a bus. it's a completely different thing to what the US is doing there. For them, their national interests and their commercial interests are aligned with what their actions are right now.
Correct.
Whereas comparing to what if suppose a bus was to be attacked in India, it's completely different to what your escalation and de-escalation ladder would be as to what it is right now. What's happening in the Middle East right now could be simplified to a very simple thing, right? Right now, you would say that okay, these Iran had their proxies like Hezbollah, Hamas, and all these guys. They were at peak strength for the last few years. In 2024, after Assad went and Hezbollah will weaken and Hamas will weaken, they were at their weakest right now. If you were to look at it from a very military standpoint, where all their proxies were weakened, they didn't have enough support in the region. US recognizes as an opportunity that okay, we can now go in and get what we want. You can simplify it as much as you want, but that's what it really comes down to, right? They know that they're gonna run out. The petrodollar cannot be propped up by what's happening right now. Like the GCC eventually knows that okay, we've reached a limit of how much we can realistically prop up the petrodollar by. They know that to keep going at the economic state that they're at with the AI bubble bursting, they know what's coming. They know they need something to prop up the petrodollar. And with Iran still holding on to that amount of resources, recently, I think yesterday they bombed that island. I don't know the name of it, but basically
the artificial island, yeah,
the artificial island, which is
Diego Massa.
90% of Iran's fuel flows through there. US is, if you look at where they've attacked, where they've bombed, they've specifically left the oil facility. Like there cannot be a more obvious sign as to what they're doing.
Exactly.
So to say that commercial interests and national interests are not aligned with what they're doing right now is just blatantly, I think, it's just not true. Like of course, what they're doing aligns with what their commercial interests are. The entire purpose is their commercial interest.
That is something. Military profit and energy profit.
No, but that again comes down to national interest.
Because again, I
Their
feel
national interest is their commercial.
Exactly.
And I will say
So that is what we agree.
The other way around.
No, but both holds the same value.
I will say
Yeah.
that this is why
The
America
commercial interest is national interest. National interest is commercial interest.
and America has proven that like if commercial interest
No, national interest has to be popular interest also.
I agree. I agree.
No,
No, I agree with that. I agree with that. It has to be. It has to be.
We're
It's
talking
just
about
that.
democracies here.
No, I agree. I agree.
Discount the masses.
No, I absolutely agree.
Masses have been discounted historically.
No, but with USA,
irrespective of whether you're in a democracy, an autocracy, a theocracy, it does not matter.
But you'll still.
No. See, that is a very extreme
Arshad made a
perspective.
very good point.
Extreme perspective, but
Yeah.
realistically, that's the world we're living in.
Okay.
And with respect to
Going back to your point, what you all presented about people's, whatever their opinion doesn't matter anymore, the masses. I think the people's opinion matters because the moment you take away the idea of trade of weapons, the people lose what their economy was.
Fair enough.
So ideally, it goes.
Yeah, it's like
when you say people don't matter, you have to take into consideration how well the government or the state has been in sort of silencing the people in the first place.
Yeah.
numbing them.
In countries like America, they have done an excellent job in
At
making
silencing the
that
people.
Not only are the people not silenced, other countries silence them, like Iran and these guys silence their people, but they're still educated and aware, which is why there are revolutions.
No,
that happen.
America's like invasion of the body snatchers. They're not even people at this
In
point. They're
America,
us.
the
Like,
population is numbed down and they're so unaware and uneducated about what actually matters.
willfully unaware and uneducated.
Whatever you're the willful or not, that's a completely separate argument of
Yeah.
whether it's a willful ignorance or it's just a ignorance
Lack of
that-
education.
Yeah, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what they think because they never think that broad picture about. Any decision that America makes is now vested amongst the interests of the 1 or 2% that is making the
The
decision.
profit. Yeah.
The other 98% genuinely are
barely even understand the world
ostracized
works. Barely even
and
understand.
Okay.
they're unaware of what's actually happening.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter what their
So
perspective
let us ground this to the argument of where people matter. Right? So in my opinion, just an idea to throw out there, the opinion of people does not matter when you go to war, but the opinion of people does matter when you withdraw from it.
When you
Withdraw from it.
little more nuanced than that, but I get what
Yeah,
you're saying.
yeah, you get what I'm
which
saying.
comes
Right?
to our next argument of
But actually,
resolve.
I do want the nuance
So,
because I don't. get
We'll
it.
do the second claim.
We will come to that after that.
Okay, fine.
So the second claim is that Iran wins. Though Iran makes it out on top. His claim is that the US makes it out on top. So three metrics that I would weigh my claim on. It is focus, clarity, resolve. Focus means my goals and my intentions for the future are limited and are charted out coherently. Clarity means that there is a set plan in the move to achieve that goal, and resolve basically means that there is enough political and personal backing into the agenda as well. I feel like on these fronts, Iran
has
has
come out
an
front.
asymmetrical advantage.
Absolutely.
Okay, because they have a set plan that the US did not have. There was an intervention, but there was no goal of where to take things from or where to put an end to things. Right now, it's just blind escalation. Second, clarity. I feel like the administration right now of Iran and the people of Iran are more vindictive and more vengeful, which will then prove the forces and their strength, which will show in the forces' strength as well. And the third, when we're talking resolve, for Iran, it's a matter of life and death. US is not directly involved in the conflict, therefore, and we've seen this historically in the Middle East as well, that the US resolve wanes over time. It starts high, it always starts high, but then it eventually slows down and dies a very slow and painful death. You saw that in Iraq, you saw that in Afghanistan. This slow withdrawal that happened in Kabul in 2021, after you realize there's nothing left to do. You've destroyed it, it's in ruins, now there's nothing left to do. So I feel like the Iranian resolve is not going to reduce anytime soon, and I think that's what's going to make sure that the Iranians have that asymmetric advantage as well, on top of the geographic advantage that they already have of the hilly region, which then brings us back to the ground troop conversation.
Again, there's a flaw in your thing. Afghanistan shares the same thing. They had hilly areas, they had like rugged terrain.
Correct, but there was a ground intervention as well.
And it took a longer time for them to again de-escalate, because even there, I think it was about 20 years what it took.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So let me present my counters to his argument, right?
We want to explore this first.
No, this is what I have to say.
Yeah.
It's almost the same similarity.
He's as Afghanistan.
There are a few key differences between them, but
Yeah. Okay, so I'll just give you the points and then we can just come back to that. Yeah. So essentially, what I'm saying is, if we go into a ground invasion, everything he says holds true, right? Absolutely holds true, because the moment we get into ground invasion, US is bound to lose, because at that point, the definition of what is win comes down to the definition with regard to Vietnam and so on. But what I'm saying is, what is going to happen here, and what we've seen so far in the post-Vietnam every endeavor that US has taken, is that it is destroy and leave, right? So essentially, they will keep using their this is my prediction, right? They will keep using their aerial forces. To some extent, they might even go into naval presence, right? And they will cripple the country as much as they can, and then they go back. They come back again a few years later, do the same thing, and go back. In that sense, the war never manifests, and US stays on top, because they have the economic power to keep doing so. They have so much disposable military income, right? Which Iran does not have. So, which is why I would say that the United States of America would come out on top, provided they take that approach, right? If they're smart enough to not invade ground troops, that will happen. But the moment the ground troops are involved, it's a lost cause.
I do not think they will invade.
And this is also, mind you, this is also US's best case scenario that he's presenting.
So just to add on to what is point, it comes down to what their strategy is, or what Iran's strategy is and what US strategy is. I think I'm not sure we've broken it down very well. But Iran's strategy and US strategy can be divided into two separate things. Iran's strategy is a life and death situation for them. They know that they only have like 3 levers to pull. Like we said, they have the Hormuz Strait, they have the oil, and then they have the people. US, on the other hand, they have a lot of things at their disposal that they can utilize. Number one is what if they actually invade on foot, which they know after the amount of experiences that they have, that they will inevitably end up losing the war if they end up invading Iran on ground. Then they're left with the plethora of sort of approaches that they do have, and that they are applied, right? The advancement of technologies, they don't even have to step a foot into Iran to destroy them as the way that they have been, and crippling them from an infrastructure perspective. And I think what we're really not taking into consideration is we discussed how Iran has been broken down into these 3 separate groups or 4 separate groups or whatever it is. US's ability with Israel involved to mobilize the people of Iran themselves, which is what their tactic has been mainly, and we've not spoken about it at all, is that US and Israel combined. The amount of propaganda that they've been spreading in the people of Iran themselves has been more than enough for them.
But this is limited to urban areas only.
It's irrespective of whether or not it's limited to urban areas. The fact is that US and Israel combined can sort of ignite the revolution in Iran itself and then come in and take over. And they've not effectively done this well.
I'll tell you why.
And they failed terribly this time also.
They failed terribly, but this time they've learned from their mistakes. If I was to predict what would have happened was, they sort of mobilized the people of Iran themselves instead of, once they cripple the infrastructure, once the people start suffering, and then they proceed to mobilize the people against the government themselves, or the current Shia Sunni, I'm not sure who's in power. Shias in power themselves. The people themselves will do US's job for them, and all they have to do is then come in and place a place.
I don't think they will.
Let me counter that for you. So basically, the US and the Israeli propaganda that you've been seeing all this while is limited to urban areas where we're talking about the democratic groups. That's mainly Farsi speaking. The majority of the country is Shia and Arabic speaking. For them, attack on their supreme leader
It's a
is
big
cause
deal.
for jihad. It is cause for a religious war that extends not just within Iran but to the entire diaspora across the Middle East.
Okay.
That is another level of mobilization which cannot be counted
But
to any
I
extent.
will tell you.
I think what we're also not taking into consideration is that when you talk about Iran as in mobilizing the entire theological perspective themselves, they've also alienated the GCC, they alienated Saudi, they alienated their main support that they had.
No. They're not their main support. They're the Sunnis.
The Sunnis are the main support. Sure.
No, they're no.
No,
I'm
the
saying Sunnis
Sunnis
are
will
against
never-
them.
The
They-
Sunnis are against them.
Yeah.
However, what does Iran have? What is Iran have working for them right now? Let's talk about that, right? If we were to put in
Iran has the Strait working for them right now.
working for them very effectively.
Iran has arm twisting with less cost being damaged, cost damage onto them.
They are
Russia backing,
China backing
also
them.
backing them, not on paper though. We don't have evidence, but we know it.
North Korea backing them.
Hezbollah in the picture, and you have
Houthi in the picture.
So you have a Lebanon resistance onto Israel from another front also. Iran is not being attacked on multiple fronts the way Israel is.
Yeah.
You need to keep that in mind.
Okay, so the mobilization of people itself, let's look at it, right? The entire argument of mobilizing people is your approach is an insanely good approach. What I'm saying is US will not take it.
Yeah,
Right?
I agree with that.
So I'll tell you why they will not. I'll tell you why they will not.
US is not taking it.
I will tell you why they will not. Yeah.
US is not doing it. I think historically what I
You are saying Israel might do it.
You should take
Yeah, I'll tell you why.
That's what I'm
No, I'll tell you why they won't do it. Because every time they mobilize people just to create a cause for justification, right? Now they have it. They are not going to invest in propaganda anymore simply because now they have the cause for intervention. It is cheaper for them to drop missiles and bombs than it is for them to fund propaganda.
No, but the possibility of an insurgency is inherently impossible.
Exactly. Because the majority.
That's
I
what
agree.
I'm trying to tell you.
I agree.
after Khameini's death, it's definitely something that's much more unfeasible than it would have been.
Yeah, before, yeah, exactly.
Their approach initially was, and what Israel was
Doing, if they stuck to it, yeah.
If they stuck to their propaganda approach,
Yeah,
that
maybe.
They would have won.
They would have
Maybe.
100% been able to overthrow the government.
I
without
absolutely agree with
needing
that, yeah.
any military
Fair
action.
enough.
Yeah.
But they then again fucked up.
They fucked up with the attack, exactly.
Because they
Decapitation, na playbook Middle East.
So they think cutting the snake's head off will kill the snake.
But I feel like
But they fail to understand it's not a snake.
Yeah. You cut off one head, two more.
I feel like but at this point, Mossad should know that Iran is not. a
No,
state.
they didn't know that until then. Until they killed them, so
Do we really believe that?
no, they tried it with Hezbollah, and they seemed like it worked, but it didn't. Right?
So they didn't learn that.
They didn't
lesson?
learn that lesson.
But then they're
I thought killing him was a mistake.
And I don't understand after what they had in Syria, after the success that
It's
they
like a
had in
war
Syria
room
with
discussion.
displacing Assad, I do not possibly understand why they would choose to take this approach
Why did they
again.
kill him?
Like Assad was like the playbook. You won like Syria after years and years of war. You
Yeah.
won through displacing it through the people themselves. I don't understand
Why they wouldn't do the same thing here? I agree.
Why the fuck would you not do the
Yeah.
exact same thing that worked for you not even 2 years ago? And now you.
I think it just comes down to money. It's cheaper.
It's cheaper that way, but
Yeah.
then again, the amount of money that you're investing.
I agree, yeah. It's a-
America's elite have
it is
become
proportional,
very
I agree,
short-sighted. I don't know if you noticed.
They
that.
have,
Become
they
very
have.
They
short-sighted.
have.
They become very rash.
They've become rash because they know that they can do whatever the
The
fuck
fuck
they
they
want
want.
to get away with it because of the success that they've had with demobilizing their own people.
People.
Yeah.
They know that whatever approach we take, whether we win or lose, it does not matter.
We'll keep
Yeah.
winning.
We'll
Like
keep
your
it.
well thought out ideas, like
Peter
the-
is
your-
having a
Yeah.
good time.
your
Yes.
well thought out ideas
Amazing
will
time.
never happen
Best
in
time.
America anymore. Because like
If you were to look at this from a different lens, okay, we're looking at it focused into the Middle East and its reactions directly. If you were to look at this from a larger perspective, the economy, like the defense structure of the economy, even with the war, how much is the S&P down? 1.3%.
1.3. Yeah.
The US is at full-blown war with another country, or the closest that you can get in today's day and age. Your entire S&P is down 1.3%. People need to understand that the economic downfall that they're facing because of this 13%, and US is down only 1.3%, which is, I think people are not understanding that despite the fact that they're at war, the amount of investment that they're getting just through their defense, what it all becomes, right? The amount of, like, if you're looking at this from an economic perspective, from what the war is doing, FII investments in India have gone down, the Nikkei is down, all
We'll
your
come to India
indexes are down, except the country that is at
Perfect
war.
segue.
Yeah. Perfect
If
segue.
they were supposed to now the
Yeah.
entire world is on a bear market. If they simply wanted to put their FIIs elsewhere, if GCC wanted to invest somewhere else, all of the markets are down. It's an all-time low. Like what Nifty is at an all 62 week
62,
low.
yeah.
Nikkei is at like a decent 7% down. All of these markets are at their all-time lows. You have GCCs looking to invest somewhere. You have US places, US funds that are looking to invest money somewhere. and now the entire world is at an all-time low. If you are looking at it from an economic perspective, US has created a market opportunity for itself to one, offset the AI bubble, two, please the population that is obviously looking for it. So even if they don't win the war in the Middle East, they will win the war collectively from an economic perspective, irrespective of what happens in the Middle East.
Thank you so much for bringing that segue. That will allow us to look at India, right? So let us look at India today. We have 2 points, right? We were first the Vishwa Guru. Today we suddenly became Vishwa Bandhu, right? So now what are we? Vishwa what?
Vishwa what is the question?
Is the question, right? Okay, so let's look at the economic elements that he started with, right? Our market is very much down, but we are propped up by saying that our petroleum prices are stable, our LPG supply is stable. Inflated so much, right? So what should have India's petroleum prices been at around 62, 63 rupees? Where was it? 94, right? What is it today? Still 94. Why is that? Because they inflated the price so much that even if the price increases, right, they can bear the cost themselves. Exactly. So petroleum prices, we are paying war prices even when there is no war, right? So that is the reality of India. So are we really a Vishwa Guru? I don't think so, right? Then if we are a Vishwa Guru, then we should have been able to have a say in the conflict, right? We should have been able to hold on to our Nam position. But then we went on and said that Israel is our fatherland, and so on and so forth, right?
The US gave us
Permission, exactly. They gave us permission to buy Russian oil, right? So all of that happened. So I don't know. So suddenly we're like, okay, now we are a Vishwa Bandhu, we're everyone's friend, right? So we came back to the Nam position, right? The same Nam position they were shitting on for so long, we've come back to, because that's the most safe option, because otherwise we get cooked, right? So
we're already getting cooked. I mean, exactly. Chabahar Port, India bloody built that and
and they bombed it. They bombed our port and we did nothing.
It was our counter to Gwadar.
Go there.
We should also talk about the amount of vested interest India has economically
in Israel, because they are our largest arms exporter. They are
the current conflict.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to go to Israel itself. You see the amount of remittance which comes from
GCC, exactly.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah. So that brings us to our 5. I think we've covered all 5 with the titling.
Then there is Russian oil that we need to talk.
So we have global remittances, we have Russian oil, we have Israel, we have Iran, right? Iran is one.
Iran,
and the Iran with regard to the Chabahar Port, and then we have our frigates. Okay, so these are all things that we should keep in mind when considering.
So we're being pulled in 5 directions. Now the question is, what would a non-interventionist choose to prioritize?
If we are a NAM country, how should we have gone? Yeah, Israel.
So Israel facts are all known. Okay, for Israel, facts are known. We're the biggest defense buyers from there. The Heron and Searcher drones. Heron and Seeker and Searcher. I think Searcher.
We're the biggest. We're also the biggest arms importer for Israel.
Now, but understand that when we took solidarity with Israel during October 7, the Modi government had to rapidly walk back on its unconditional solidarity. Now, the question, what we chose to, the stance we took was studied ambiguity. And I found it a very uncomfortable stance that we would take, because I feel like it was not standing on, I think it was standing on eggshells. That's my analysis of it.
It was not standing on international interest.
Absolutely not.
Exactly.
Secondly, we have Chabahar and Iran. India propped up that entire port. It was our response to Gwadar. All our trade would basically come from there, and it has been blown to bits now. And choosing to not make a statement, or choosing to just suck it up and try to do what US wants us to do, is another problem that we found was questionable. Talking about the Middle East, we've got about 90 lakh Indians that are living and working in the Gulf right now. Oman, Qatar, Bahrain, and they're scared for their lives. A lot of people want to come back and they're stuck there, and they're generating approximately 40 billion of revenue per year. And I think that is something that's extremely scary, because we, by choosing to walk away from the Iranian conflict, we're also walking away from our own citizens to a certain extent, which is not something a Vishwa Guru or a Vishwa Bandhu would allow, for that matter. Second, Gulf remittance, I think we'll leave that for the thing. Then pressure 4 is the Russian oil. We've been given permission to...
While we've actually been buying it for 4 years now, so...
We're buying it at discounted prices. If Iran does manage to come out on top, we continue to buy from Iran as well, and that actually gives us access to a certain alternative, as well as 2 points to buy discounted oil.
But we didn't capitalize it though. That's our mistake.
Now, recently, there was an Iranian frigate that had performed a joint operation
with us.
Like, it was not an operation; it was basically
An
a
exercise,
practice,
yeah.
an exercise. It was returning back to Iran, and while it was off the coast of Sri Lanka, it was sunk by the US, a US ship. Now, reports say that that frigate was unarmed. The other side of the argument is that it was secretly carrying ballistics. It was not visible, and it was headed for Diego Carlos, which now has been
Bombed again.
So there is plausible deniability on the other side as well. But my biggest contention is that if we call ourselves this Mahasagar we've been hearing about for a really long time, where India wants to prop itself up as the guardian of the Indian Ocean, if that ship was sunk, we should have had a rescue operation, which the Sri Lankans had to do alone. Which is something that I find extremely questionable and wrong.
It's very well.
And if we do want to call ourselves a Vishwa Guru, or what would a teacher say when there are two kids fighting, or what would a friend say when two kids are fighting, the morally right thing would be to help the weak.
Yeah.
Even if they're in the right or in
exactly.
the wrong.
Exports and our imports with respect to oil. We import, I think, 80% of our crude right now from Iran. And the 20% rest from Russia. Our current stance is based on the simple fact that irrespective of how much we can buy from Russia, we simply don't want to leverage our position to an extent where if US and Russia get into a conflict, we have to either stop importing from Russia or we have to, alienate the US, both of which are horrible options for us. Right now we're importing from Iran and our situation is such so that irrespective of the US and Iran conflict, we maintain a sort of alliance with both and be able to import our crude in the constitutional manner. The only reason that these things happen when we do not, or we let the US bomb ships and not go out to, rescue them, is so that we can continue to maintain our 80% crude import without alienating the crude. It's the sort of trade-off that you have to make when you're looking at it from a realistic perspective. Like, I have to let people die in the Indian Ocean that are not mine, just that I can continue importing 80% of my crude. And that's the trade-off that you have to make when you're looking at it from a realistic perspective. It reduces us to a very, very shitty situation in terms of foreign affairs and our say. We can see that from an economic perspective with our market. You can see that with our political perspective and what say we have in the situation and our military perspective. But it comes at the cost of the crude coming into.
I'll give you a concession that following a non-interventionist policy is okay. But what should that non-interventionist policy look like is very different from what India is actually doing. Right?
Because we're not non-interventionist, right?
Calling for restraint versus calling to end a conflict are two very different things. When you say please have restraint, you're not calling out the action that you're condemning. You're not pointing to errors or you're not citing any law. You're just saying there is some ambiguous thing that you're doing and we would advise you to not do it. That is a stance that a non-interventionist would not take. A non-interventionist would have cited Article 2, Subclause 4 of the UN Charter and said, this is morally incorrect and this whatever these actions are incorrect.
Absolutely. But one is what non-interventionist means, what the actual text meaning of it is.
And one is what is saying.
What our interpretation and actionable on when we say we are non-interventionist. When we say we're non-interventionist country, we mean that you can do what you want as long as I get what I want. Hum sab bhai bhai, and that is our foreign policy. Our foreign policy is
no, that's not our foreign policy. No, I think we have the power to hold them accountable. As a country, we do. I feel like we're not doing it, but we do have the power because when we say something is taken seriously, as long as we don't intervene militarily, right? As long as we don't participate in the action, they will not hold us accountable. They will not retaliate in any way, because selling to us is just as profitable for them as receiving is as for us.
India is strong enough to sway the balance.
Yeah.
As well.
But what I'm saying is we have alternatives.
We underestimate our
power. Exactly.
However, it's done at a cost that we can continue
sustaining
without involving. I think it's a
very safe place.
It's a very safe and wise decision to make from a national point of view because we sort of continue to be the country that we are without having foreign intervention or foreign things to deal with. Now, it's a separate thing that even when we're left to ourselves, we're absolutely trash at running our own country. But I think what we have done pretty well is exclude ourselves from any sort of foreign wars that happen because we continue to operate.
But we also prop ourselves. But we also prop ourselves as a country that stands for certain values.
Then stop doing that, no?
Exactly.
Our values are only sort of brought into the picture when we are attacked as a country.
No.
We don't enforce our values.
No, we do.
Something foreign is happening.
We absolutely do.
Our vested interests are involved.
Pakistan, Afghanistan.
But that's our.
It's not our country.
No, Pakistan, Afghanistan directly.
Our vested interests. No, we are talking about See, I'll tell you.
What's our best interest in Pakistan?
Nothing.
Our national security is what their excuse is.
Balochistan. Why are we intervening in Iran, Pakistan then?
Baloch is pretty close to our country.
Exactly.
Close to our national security.
Yeah.
It gives us national interest. If there's a Baloch
That's what I'm saying.
tomorrow,
But at the same time, we are backing that with what? We are saying that the Balochi people have the right to self-determination. We are saying that the Afghani people have a right against being attacked by Pakistan.
Why are we doing both of these things? Because this is weakening Pakistan's foreign policy and their foreign interests.
No, but what I'm saying is we are not that selfish as a country. I feel like when Tito was around, we were strongly standing for Yugoslavia. We believed Yugoslavia had the right to self-determination.
But again, why?
40 years ago.
No, what I'm saying is when our country was so weak 40 years ago, if we had the balls to stand for exactly when we exactly. So what I'm saying is today, so is it really just a wise position or is it just that our leadership is weak?
No, it could be a
it's
bit
not
of both. I
leadership
think
is
it's not a leadership is weak. I think it's more of a perspective of, like I said, we don't want to be involved in foreign affairs. We want to focus on our country and itself.
But we're not doing that. No, we are still. We are going every other country.
I'm not saying we're good at doing what we are trying not to do.
I feel like
No, what I'm saying is we're not even trying to do that. Is not a
I feel
problem.
like our leadership is
No,
weak,
I'll tell
and
you
they
why.
want us to believe
Yugoslavia
that's
back
why.
then was a powerhouse.
No.
Yeah, because Yugoslavia, Egypt, and India were the forerunners
Of Nam.
Yeah.
Correct.
So that essentially would mean that they have a higher say if we did collaborate with them.
Okay, but we can collaborate with almost 70-80 countries this time.
But the problem is our foreign policy.
We have no, but we have BRICS, we have SCO.
We are still
we have NAM.
rebuking
Yes,
our own
sir.
BRICS member.
That's the thing. That's so stupid.
Spain is a part of the NATO.
Yes.
Spain is a part of the EU. It should be bound by its foreign policy to back the West.
They
It
have
doesn't. It's done. Look at
exactly.
Spain as a
It's called
country.
So that shows having principle.
Some solidarity.
That's because that country is run so well in itself that they have the
No, it's
ability
not
to.
run
No.
It's
They
not
just have
run
principles,
well.
bro.
Their economics are horrible.
Yeah.
They have current cattle and
They have a housing
Yeah.
crisis going on.
Yeah.
now.
housing crisis. But
We
that's why
are better than they are right
We
now.
are better than what Spain is right now. But their leaders are in a way that they would rather prioritize
Their principles.
their principles over the smooth functioning of their own country.
No, I won't even say smooth functioning because we are not threatened about smooth functioning. Our country's functioning will not be affected at all.
That
No,
is
our country's
completely
function will be affected.
How?
I'll tell you why.
If we condemn
No,
US
the
attacks,
No,
if
the
we were to
missile
condemn
attack-
US attacks,
what will happen? Tell me. If we were to condemn US attacks, what will happen?
okay, let's talk about what influences does US hold over India.
Yeah.
In all perspectives.
Correct.
Can you give me an example of what all US has invested or what percentage of our functioning or
Only thing is 35% of our trade relies on US. That's all.
35% of our trade is not a small number, and I don't think that you.
What I'm saying is that 35% of our trade, when it relies on US, it also US relies on us because we are the biggest market.
US.
We are we're the largest accessible market for US. Are you telling me they'll stop trading with us?
Huh?
Are you telling me US will stop trading with
not
us?
stop trading,
Exactly.
They just be a bitch in other ways that they have been historically in the last.
See,
What will do? Tariff will put. That's all.
Trade is the last thing what
Not-
any country would cut off.
Exactly.
Even at war, trade is
Nothing.
the last thing.
US cannot do anything other than put tariff.
Now,
With India,
I want
nothing
to
else.
talk to you
No,
about that
no,
US
I'll come back to the
in
fact.
terms of the Russians.
They'll finance Pakistan.
They'll finance Pakistan.
Have they not already been doing that?
They've not done it in the last.
Oh, they have.
They definitely still.
Literally, the last conflict we had, US financed Pakistan.
Pakistan is a US asset. Like it is a
Pakistan is a US asset so that they can hold control over India. Historically,
But
in the
it's not
70s.
just whole control. No, I agree. It is intimidation. And I feel like even US knows that India can be a much bigger problem,
Of course
which is
it
why
can.
they constantly gaslight. They know you're weak, stinky little
Yeah,
people.
so
like,
what do you think the base in the Indian Ocean, the financing of Pakistan, the constant control? Who the fuck is US to tell us you can buy oil from Russia in the first place? What US has done is systemically create a sort of understanding with our government that you will do what we tell you to, otherwise you will face actions. If anyone had the basic thought process to look at it from a very economic point, US, what realistically can they do to affect us? And we look at, even if the 35% of investment from US was to go away, we have Russia, we have China.
And it won't
we have-
go away.
It won't go away in the first place. And even if it were to go away, we still have so many other alternatives. The fact is that our country.
I'll tell you why we are kissing US's ass. One man, Adani.
Oh, absolutely.
Gautam Adani has major US investments.
Right now, we already get the permit to build the
Refinery.
the biggest oil refinery that US ever has seen.
Yeah, the Texas one.
Yeah.
Adani has invested in the US refineries.
Adani is building the biggest US refinery ever.
That's how we started
This
designing
entire
this
session.
Like,
So basically, arguments are like we are not. We basically claim to be non-interventionists,
But we are doing whatever Adani wants.
stuff, And the argument that, oh, we are just non-interventionist and we're non-interventionist otherwise because we can't do anything. Even that's not true. It's all gaslighting. So basically, India is in limbo. It's kind of like doing half measures now.
Yeah.
It kind of needs to pick a side.
It's not doing. No, I'll tell you what the problem is. You said India is functioning properly. Now, when the missile was fired from the ship, 90 kilometers of Sri Lankan coast. Now, automatically, India is bound to detect that missile was there or there was a submarine there.
Exactly.
Why didn't we decide?
Because they're pussies.
The hunch would 100% be that we very well knew that was
No,
going
Yeah. We knew it.
Yeah,
No,
no, I'll tell you
it was
if furtherance of that.
Hmm.
So this makes that if USA has put a choke on India not to do anything.
Hmm.
Now, this a friend of mine was explaining me what sea control and sea denial means. Now, US, I don't remember what fleet it is, but either the fourth or fifth fleet would be bound to come to the Arabian Sea to put a choke point on Iran itself.
Hmm.
Now, we'll be like, oh, it's putting a choke point on Iran. But what it creates over there, it creates a US fleet presence. Now, automatically, India would be subjected to not, be as close to the US. Now, our own oceans are being, what do you say? What do you call it? Tracked or
Tread upon.
not tread upon, like have a military
Monitored.
routines and all.
Yeah, routines.
In our own ocean from a country which is halfway across the world.
No, that's because of Quad.
Sorry.
That's because of Quad.
Okay, Quad also for the matter. But again, that places a restraint on India.
India agreed.
Now, whatever, again,
Agreeing to Quad was the stupidest thing we did.
exactly. So again, what India does, if they cannot host their own routine exercises, it creates an even more worse thing. Is I read this after my friend experienced sea and sea control. The US fleets are like almost 80 meters longer
Than Indian fleet, yeah.
The biggest
Indian fleet, yeah.
Now, what that happens, we cannot launch a Rafale from our own Indian fleet. But the US can launch an F-15s.
Yeah.
It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, because our naval, then we don't have a navy at that point.
Yeah, they can launch an F-15 and just show strategic dominance. They could just launch an F-15 for the fun of it. And
Yeah.
India would be bound to not even step into the waters.
Our military presence and US's military superiority was never in question. That we know that it's never going to get to a point where
No,
US
but
and
that would
India-
But I don't think they'll ever threaten us with it.
They're never going
Yeah.
to threaten.
That is a threat to India, but not in a direct
Direct way. They will not do that directly
Never
because
do it directly,
because again our market is very important for them. Only because Indians buy their products are their businesses even running.
But that's what makes an Indian support also
Unfeasible. Exactly. We shouldn't be supporting. We should reclaim our strength.
That is again putting them in
In a very-
but
yeah.
saying that you don't do anything.
Like we need
Exactly.
to act
It's
more
rather
as
than
a
us.
allies.
It's rather than us, forcing a foreign policy of the non-alignment. It's US forcing it on us.
This is
Yeah.
not, I'm sorry, this is-
Exactly.
That's so
Exactly. So at that point, it stops being non-alignment.
The
It becomes
frustrating part
submission.
that you can see, like,
Exactly.
we're using a lot of fancy words to basically say we need to start acting like we're an equal ally,
Right,
not
rather than
their
being a bitch.
vassals.
Yeah.
My point
We're
is
not
that
their
we
vassals.
have historically decided as a country and the leaders that we simply do not want to be involved in the global landscape to a point wherein we have to sacrifice a lot of our own things that are.
No, we don't even have to do that much. Is what I'm saying.
That's what the perspective of the leaders is, that if we were to go and actually show
I agree.
a global perspective.
No, I'll tell you what the
It would
perspective.
cost that even if it's not a lot, they just simply don't want to bear it.
Correct. No, I feel like it's not even about cost bearing as much as it is about backing. Right. The only Indian Prime Minister that the United States of America has propped up is Narendra Modi. Okay. There is no other Indian Prime Minister that has gone to USA and conducted a rally for a sitting Prime Minister. Okay. We are the only ones that have it. Narendra Modi is the only one that's done it. So the BJP currently is being financed by United States of America.
That
Right. To a certain extent.
I think that's
Right.
I think we're hypothesizing that. I'm
No.
sure it's true.
There was a recent parliament session where Rahul Gandhi made the claim, and he had evidence of it as well, where he said that George Soros has paid Mr. Harshdeep Puri.
I'm not well researched.
Okay, you should watch that session.
But again,
Yeah.
I think it comes off as a far off political hypothesis.
No, it's not a political hypothesis when he has evidence. No, he has
No, I'm
paper
sure
trail, money
that there
trail.
is, I'm sure, I'm 100% sure that there is some truth. behind
Absolutely,
the
yeah.
security of finance. But then again, who doesn't US finance?
Exactly. That's the thing. You know, what I'm saying is, US so directly financing a government in India right now indicates why we are being so submissive.
Absolutely.
Right. So that when we can choose alternative options, which will cause minimal loss to us, while also, letting us stand as a global power, we are not choosing to do that simply because it's easier to listen to our Western overlords.
It's the deal. It's the deal.
Yeah, it's a deal.
You pay off your leaders and your
Exactly.
It's not like a very complex situation.
Yeah,
There are 2 billionaires from the US that have connections to Mr. Harshdeep Puri, who is our energy finance minister. Like he's oil and petroleum ministry's head. So when our petroleum prices are propped up so high, we are mixing ethanol while no other country is mixing ethanol. A lot of these things become very serious because why are these billionaires financing this one man?
The worst part is that
I think we can move to close first, and we can.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, I think we're already closed. Yeah.
it's so sad.
I know, but
it's so sad that you were like
Formally closed.
who
Formally
does
closed.
Formally,
America
let's
finance?
close.
Like, no,
I
the
can
fact
stop
that financing Indian government is something we need to be
worried about.
But the thing is that America does so many things we need to be worried about that we're just numb to all of it.
Okay, so let's formally close the session once. Yeah.
Yeah.
Said.
Whatever
You're
tool
cutting.
we use to.
You're cutting.
No, it's
Oh no, don't worry about it.
So yeah, we wanted to explain that everybody explaining this conflict to you has a secret position or a bias that they choose not to reveal. The question is that you make sure that you find the root of that, because then it helps us to be able to dissect.
Yeah.
Like when we spoke about India's position today, we were able to understand why we would be acting like that in a certain way. That being said, we have positions too. We took a position of game theory. We took a position of
Anti-game
rationality. We took a position of anti-game theory.
Yeah.
But mind you that when we choose these lenses and we pick these
Is
frameworks,
this the ones that are easy?
yeah, and we're also leaving a lot of things invisible. So we can say that Iran is rational, but that does not justify the morality police
Yeah.
sexually harassing a woman, or that does not justify bearing the cost of war onto a child in Gaza. So let's keep that in mind when we are walking away from this. I hope you guys found this Sunday a good couple of hours.
It's a nice change from the previous two kinds of sessions. It was a little intense debate kind of a session. It was nice.
Yeah.
So
I got educated hard today.
And yeah, so next time you guys hear a conversation or hear any sort of rhetoric, ask
Use all
what
these
is
points.
invisible.
Use all these points.
Use these lenses and also ask what do you not see through these lenses.
Yeah.
All right. With that, I think we can close.
Okay, just to clarify for the camera, a lot of the anti-national stuff that I've said are not actually anti-national. I'm not an anti-national. I love my country very much.
We love our country. We want to see it win.
And we want to see it be amazing as fuck. Yeah.
We've made claims basis the lenses we wanted to pick up, and we're limited to the knowledge of our own resources and information.
That's why.
So yeah, I think we can close.